The email notification chimed at 11:47 p.m., just as I was closing another support ticket for Henderson and Associates. Lucas Fallon, 38 years old, owner of Coastal Tech Solutions, and apparently the world's biggest fool. Paternity test results, confidential, sat in my inbox like a loaded weapon. My hands trembled as I clicked the attachment. The lab letterhead looked official enough, but something felt wrong. After 15 years fixing computers and debugging code, you develop an instinct for things that don't belong. The formatting was slightly off, the digital signature pixelated in a way that screamed amateur forgery. But the words hit like a sledgehammer anyway. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Lily wasn't mine. 6 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and Saturday morning cartoons, all built on a lie. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, then did what any self-respecting IT specialist would do. I ran a forensic analysis on the document. The metadata told the real story. Created 3 hours ago on Serena's laptop, using a template downloaded from some sketchy website. My wife, the woman who couldn't figure out how to update her own phone, had somehow managed to forge a paternity test. "Lucas, you still up?" Serena's voice drifted from the bedroom, honey-sweet and concerned. "You've been in that office for hours." I minimized the email and called back. "Just finishing up some client work. Be there in a minute?" The lie rolled off my tongue so easily it scared me. I opened a new browser window and started digging. If Serena could play games with fake documents, I could play games with real detective work. Her cloud storage, her social media, her email, all of it synchronized to our shared family network. All of it accessible to the guy who set up the system. What I found made my stomach twist into knots. Months of deleted text messages, carefully scrubbed but recoverable if you knew where to look, photos that never made it to her Instagram feed, calendar appointments marked as client meetings that happened at hotels across town. And then I found the name that explained everything: Julian Baird, Serena's boss at Meridian Marketing, the silver-haired charmer who showed up to every company barbecue with his perfect smile and expensive watch. The same Julian Baird who'd been sending my wife messages like, "Can't wait to taste you again," and "Tell Lucas you're working late tomorrow." I sat back in my chair, the pieces clicking into place with mechanical precision. The late nights, the new lingerie, the way she'd started pronouncing certain words differently, picking up Julian's pretentious accent. Even Lily's features, which I'd always assumed came from Serena's side of the family. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Zoe. "How's everything at home? Serena seemed stressed at lunch today." Lunch. On a Tuesday. When Serena had told me she was in back-to-back meetings all day. I stared at that message for a long time, a cold realization creeping up my spine. Zoe knew. My own sister, the person I'd trusted with every secret since childhood, knew about the affair and had been covering for Serena. The husband in me wanted to storm into the bedroom and demand answers. The businessman in me knew better. You don't confront an opponent until you've gathered all the evidence and planned your strategy. I opened a new document and started typing. Project Accountability, Phase 1. If Serena wanted to play games with fake paternity tests and secret affairs, she was about to learn that her computer nerd husband had been holding back. Way back. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The next morning, I watched Serena apply her makeup with the same methodical precision she used for everything else. Designer foundation, perfectly contoured cheekbones, lips glossed to magazine perfection. She looked like success, smelled like expensive perfume, and lied like a politician. "I'll be late again tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Julian's got this new campaign for the Henderson account, and we need to nail down the demographics before the presentation." "Julian?" I let the name hang in the air for a moment. "You two have been working together a lot lately." Her hand paused for just a fraction of a second before continuing with her mascara. "He's very hands-on with the big accounts. You know how it is?" Oh, I knew exactly how it was. After she left for work, I spent the morning installing some new software on our home network. Nothing malicious, just some enhanced monitoring tools that would help me keep track of our family's digital security. Any IT professional would recommend the same precautions. My phone rang around 10. Coastal Tech Solutions, Lucas speaking. "Luke, thank goodness." The voice belonged to Tom Rodriguez, my best friend and only full-time employee. Mrs. Patterson's computer is making that weird noise again, and she's convinced the Russians are trying to steal her cookie recipes. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Tom, I need you to clear your schedule for the next few days. We've got a special project coming up." Tom had been with me since I started the business 5 years ago. former Marine, current caffeine addict, and the only person I trusted to handle sensitive situations without asking too many questions. I found him at Patterson's house, calmly explaining why her 15-year-old desktop sounded like a worn-out blender. After we finished the repair, I drove us back to the shop and laid out the situation. "So let me get this straight," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "Your wife forged a paternity test. She's having an affair with her boss, and your sister's been covering for her. That's the summary, yes. And you want to... I want to make sure the truth comes out, publicly, permanently, and in a way that ensures I don't lose everything I've worked for in the process." Tom nodded slowly. "What do you need?" I pulled out a legal pad covered with notes and diagrams. "First, we secure the business assets, transfer everything to the corporate account, make sure Serena can't touch the money if she decides to get vindictive. Second, we gather irrefutable evidence of the affair. Third, we find out who else knows about this and has been lying to me. And fourth, we make sure everyone else finds out too." We spent the afternoon setting up what Tom dubbed Operation Transparency. I transferred our savings to a business account that required both partners' signatures for withdrawals, except I'd updated the signature card 6 months ago when Serena was too busy to come to the bank herself. Legally questionable? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. Next came the surveillance equipment. Nothing illegal, just some high-quality cameras for our home security system, GPS tracking for our vehicles, in case they got stolen, of course, and enhanced monitoring software for our family computers. By 5 o'clock, I had a complete picture of Serena's digital life spread across 3 monitors: her real calendar, her actual location data, and most importantly, her communications with Julian. The messages were worse than I'd imagined. Not just physical betrayal, but emotional intimacy that should have belonged to me. Julian knew about Serena's fears, her dreams, her frustrations with our marriage. He knew things about my wife that I didn't know myself. And then I found the conversation that changed everything. "Are you sure Luke doesn't suspect anything?" Julian had texted 2 weeks ago. "He's clueless. Spends all day with his computers and thinks I'm just working late. Besides, Zoe keeps me informed if he starts asking questions. Your sister-in-law is very helpful. She's not doing it for free, but Luke trusts her completely, so it's worth the investment." Investment. My sister was taking money to spy on me for my cheating wife. I printed out the entire conversation thread, along with the fake paternity test and about 50 other pieces of evidence. Then I drove to Samira's bar, the local watering hole where half the city's business community gathered to gossip and make deals. Samira herself was behind the bar, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s who knew everyone's secrets and most of their weaknesses. She'd been serving drinks in this town for 20 years, and her memory was better than most people's filing systems. "Lucas Fallon," she said, sliding a beer across the bar without being asked. "You look like a man with something on his mind. Just wondering if you've seen my wife around lately. She's been working such long hours. I thought she might be stopping by for drinks with her colleagues." Samira's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Serena's a beautiful woman. Draws attention wherever she goes. I'm sure she does. Especially from that silver-haired fellow she's been meeting. Julian something. They seem very focused on their work. I took a long sip of my beer. Focused. That's one way to put it. Of course, it's none of my business what consenting adults do in their private time, but if it were my husband, she shrugged. Well, I'd want to know. I left the bar with confirmation of what I already suspected, and a new ally who clearly had no love for cheating spouses. Samira had seen them together at least 6 times over the past 2 months, always at corner tables, always touching more than business partners should. Back home, I found Serena in the kitchen, heating up leftover takeout and scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt flicker across her face. "How was work?" I asked. "Exhausting. This Henderson campaign is going to be the end of me." She set down her phone and moved closer, wrapping her arms around my waist. "I'm sorry I've been so distant lately. Once this project wraps up, things will get back to normal." I held her close and breathed in the scent of her perfume mixed with something else, cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "I'm sure they will." That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe, planning my next moves. The evidence was solid, but I needed more. I needed to catch them in the act, needed proof so overwhelming that even Serena's silver tongue couldn't talk her way out of it. Most importantly, I needed to find out exactly how deep my sister's betrayal went. Phase 2 was about to begin. Wednesday morning brought rain and an opportunity. Serena announced over coffee that she'd be attending a team-building event at the Ocean View Hotel that evening. the same hotel where she'd been meeting Julian for the past 3 months. "Sounds fun," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "What time should I expect you home?" "Late, probably not until after midnight. You know how these corporate things go." I knew exactly how they went. After she left, I called Tom. "Remember that surveillance equipment we discussed? Today's the day we field test it." The Ocean View Hotel sat on a bluff overlooking the harbor, all glass and steel and pretentious architecture. The kind of place that charged $50 for a steak and called it market price, perfect for a woman trying to impress her boss. Tom and I set up in the parking garage across the street with a telephoto lens and recording equipment. Not for blackmail, I wasn't that kind of man, but for documentation, evidence that would hold up in court if things got ugly. At 6:30 p.m., Serena's BMW pulled into the hotel's valet area. She stepped out wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than most people's rent. The valet took her keys with the practiced smile of someone who'd seen this routine before. Julian arrived 10 minutes later in his Tesla, all sharp suit and confident swagger. They met in the lobby with a kiss that lasted too long for business partners and headed straight for the elevator. "Room 412, Tom muttered, tracking them through his binoculars. That's the same room they used last week. We had photos of them entering together, timestamps that proved this wasn't a business meeting, and most importantly, documentation that Serena was exactly where she wasn't supposed to be. But I wanted more than just proof of the affair. I wanted to understand the full scope of the betrayal. I drove to Zoe's apartment complex, a trendy development downtown that seemed expensive for someone working part-time at a nonprofit. My sister had always been the artistic one, the dreamer who'd rather paint than balance a checkbook. Her sudden financial stability had seemed like good news at the time. Now I wondered who was really paying her bills. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, looking genuinely surprised to see me. "Luke, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd stop by and catch up. We haven't talked much lately." Come in. She stepped aside, but I caught the quick glance she shot toward her phone on the coffee table. "Want some wine? I just opened a bottle." The apartment was nice. Too nice. Original hardwood floors, granite countertops, furniture that didn't come from a discount store. Either Zoe had won the lottery, or someone was supplementing her income. "This place is gorgeous," I said, settling onto the couch. "Must be expensive." "I got a good deal on the rent. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, but I was starting to figure it out. "How's work going? Still at the community center?" "Actually, I've been doing some consulting work on the side. Marketing stuff. Turns out my art degree is more useful than I thought." Marketing. How convenient. We chatted for another 20 minutes about family, work, and the weather. Normal sibling conversation, except for the way Zoe kept checking her phone and the nervous energy radiating from her like heat from a furnace. Finally, I stood to leave. "Tell me something, Zoe. If you knew someone close to me was lying about something important, you'd tell me, right?" Her face went pale. "Of course. Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering. Sometimes I feel like everyone knows things I don't." I left her apartment with the sick certainty that my sister was neck-deep in whatever game Serena was playing. The question was whether she was a willing participant or just another victim. Back at the hotel, Tom had captured everything we needed: Serena and Julian entering together, room service deliveries to their suite, and most damning of all, the intimate conversation they'd had on the balcony where their voices carried clearly in the night air. "I can't keep lying to him," Serena had said, leaning against the railing in her underwear. "Lucas isn't stupid. He's going to figure it out eventually." "So we speed up the timeline," Julian replied. "You file for divorce, claim irreconcilable differences, and we go public with our relationship after a respectable waiting period. What about Lily? What about her? She's not his kid anyway. The court will award custody to the biological parent. And if he fights it?" Julian's laugh was cold and calculating. "Your husband fixes computers for a living. I have the best lawyers in the state on retainer. This won't even be a contest." I listened to that recording 3 times before the rage settled into something colder and more useful. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to destroy my life and take my daughter away from me. Well, 2 could play that game. I spent the rest of the week gathering intelligence and laying groundwork. Bank records that showed unusual cash deposits in Zoe's account, always in round numbers, always a few days after Serena's girls' nights out. Hotel receipts that proved the affair had been going on for 8 months, not the 3 I'd initially discovered. Most importantly, communication records that showed exactly how they had been coordinating their deception. The fake paternity test was just the beginning. They'd been planning this for months, slowly building a case to paint me as an unfit father and unfaithful husband. Serena had been documenting every argument, every late night at the office, every time I'd snapped at Lily when I was tired or stressed. She was building a narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim seeking escape. Time to flip that script. On Friday afternoon, I got a call from Felicia Martinez, Serena's biggest rival at Meridian Marketing. We'd met at a few company parties, and I'd always gotten the impression she saw right through Serena's perfect facade. "Lucas, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I thought you should know. There are rumors going around the office about Serena and Julian." "What kind of rumors?" "The kind that could get them both terminated if HR gets wind of it. Company policy is very clear about relationships between supervisors and their direct reports. I filed that information away for future use." "I appreciate you telling me, Felicia." Serena's always acted like she's untouchable, but everyone has limits, even Julian. After I hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the wall covered with network diagrams and client schedules. Everything looked normal from the outside. Successful business, happy marriage, loving family. But underneath, the foundation was rotten. Time to bring the whole structure down. The Harbor Festival was 3 weeks away, and Serena had been selected to receive the Community Leadership Award for her volunteer work with local charities. Ironic, considering she'd been embezzling money from those same charities to pay off my sister, but the selection committee didn't know that yet. I spent Saturday morning at the festival planning meeting, volunteering to handle the audio-visual setup for the awards ceremony. After 15 years in IT, I knew every piece of equipment they'd be using, and more importantly, I knew how to make it do things the manufacturers never intended. "You're a lifesaver, Lucas," said Margaret Chen, the festival coordinator. "The company we hired last year was a disaster. Half the speeches were inaudible." "Don't worry, everyone will hear exactly what they need to hear." That afternoon, I drove to the office supply store and purchased a dozen prepaid phones, each loaded with enough credit for a few hundred text messages. Then I visited 3 different print shops, ordering copies of various documents. Nothing that could be traced back to me or my business. Tom met me at the shop that evening with a bottle of whiskey and a grim expression. "You sure about this, Luke? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." "They made that choice for me 8 months ago. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it." We spent the next 2 hours preparing what Tom called the information packages. Each envelope contained printed copies of the hotel photos, the fake paternity test alongside the real one, bank records showing Zoe's payments, and most damning of all, transcripts of Serena and Julian's recorded conversations. 50 envelopes in total. One for every major business owner in town, every member of Serena's social circle, every parent at Lily's school, and every employee at Meridian Marketing. The return address on each envelope read, "A concerned friend." Monday morning brought the first phase of Operation Transparency. While Serena was at her yoga class, I used her laptop to send a company-wide email announcing her relationship with Julian and her intention to file for divorce. The email went to everyone at Meridian Marketing, including HR, the executive team, and their biggest clients. Of course, Serena hadn't actually written or sent the email, but her laptop had, using her login credentials, during a time when she was supposed to be working from home. The metadata would show exactly what the investigators needed to see. My phone started ringing at 9:47 a.m. "Lucas, what the hell is going on?" Serena's voice was shaking with rage and panic. "Someone sent an email from my account claiming I'm having an affair with Julian. HR wants to see both of us immediately." "That's terrible," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Have you been having computer problems? Maybe someone hacked your email." "I don't know. I don't understand any of this technical stuff. Can you come down here and fix it?" "I'm in the middle of a client emergency, but I'll try to get there this afternoon." I didn't go to her office that afternoon. Instead, I went to the bank and closed our joint checking account, transferring the funds to the business account where Serena couldn't touch them. Then I visited our family lawyer and filed for divorce, citing adultery and fraud as grounds for dissolution of marriage. The legal papers would be served Wednesday morning, right before the second phase of my plan kicked into gear. Tuesday evening, I sat in my office listening to Serena pace around the house, making frantic phone calls to Julian, to Zoe, to anyone who might help her figure out how her carefully constructed lies were falling apart. "It has to be a coincidence," she kept saying. "There's no way Lucas knows anything. He would have confronted me by now." She was right about one thing. The old Lucas would have confronted her. The old Lucas would have demanded explanations, given her chances to come clean, maybe even tried to save the marriage. But the old Lucas had been married to someone who existed only in his imagination. The real Serena was a stranger, and strangers didn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Samira's in 1 hour. Come alone." Z. Zoe wanted to negotiate. That was interesting. I found my sister in the back corner booth at Samira's, hunched over a glass of wine like it contained the answers to all her problems. She looked up when I sat down, and I saw fear in her eyes for the first time since we were kids. "You know," she said without preamble. "I know. How long? Does it matter?" She took a shaky sip of wine. "Serena's going to blame me for everything. She'll say I seduced you into this, that I was jealous of your marriage. Weren't you?" Zoe's laugh was bitter and hollow. "You want to know the truth? I was trying to protect you. Serena came to me 6 months ago, told me she was having an affair but wasn't sure how to handle it. She said she needed time to figure out what she wanted." "So you decided to help her figure it out?" "I decided to buy you time. Every week I delayed, every lie I told, was another week for her to come to her senses and end it before you got hurt." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of deception. "And the money?" "Expense reimbursement. She said you'd understand if you knew the whole story, but she needed to make sure I didn't accidentally say something that would hurt you unnecessarily." It was a good story, almost believable. But I'd seen the bank records, heard the recorded conversations. Zoe hadn't been protecting me, she'd been protecting herself. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, leaning forward. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to call Serena and tell her you can't help her anymore. You're going to return every penny she paid you, and you're going to disappear from both our lives until this is over. And if I don't?" I slid a manila envelope across the table. "Then everyone in town gets to read about your side business, including the IRS." Zoe opened the envelope and went white. Inside were copies of all her financial records, documentation of every payment Serena had made, and a detailed timeline of her involvement in the deception. "You're my brother," she whispered. "You were my sister. Past tense." I left her sitting in that booth and drove home to find Serena waiting in the kitchen with divorce papers in her hand and fury in her eyes. "You want to play games, Lucas? Let's play." Serena stood in our kitchen holding the divorce papers like a weapon, her perfect composure finally cracking to reveal the calculating predator underneath. She'd changed out of her work clothes into something more strategic, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that made her look vulnerable and expensive at the same time. "Adultery and fraud?" she read from the legal documents. "That's rich, coming from a man who's been emotionally absent for years." Emotionally absent is different from physically absent, and neither one involves forging paternity tests. Her eyes flashed with something between surprise and admiration. "You found that, did you? I wondered when you'd finally put your computer skills to good use." "I found a lot of things. The question is what you plan to do about it." Serena set the papers on the counter and moved closer, switching tactics with the fluid grace of a professional manipulator. "We don't have to be enemies, Lucas. We can handle this like adults, split everything fairly, work out a custody arrangement that's best for Lily." "Lily isn't mine. She's been yours for 6 years. Biology doesn't change that." I had to give her credit. Even cornered, she was still playing the angles, still looking for weaknesses to exploit. But I'd spent weeks studying her methods, learning her patterns. I knew exactly what came next. "Of course, if you want to make this difficult," she continued, "I have documentation of your controlling behavior, your emotional manipulation, your complete disregard for our family's needs. The court will be very interested in your recent financial irregularities, too." There it was, the threat I'd been expecting. "What financial irregularities?" She smiled, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. Smart, confident, absolutely ruthless when she needed to be. "The money you've been moving around, the accounts you've been hiding, Julian's lawyers are very thorough." "Julian's lawyers, of course." "They're also very expensive," I said. "Good thing Julian can afford them." "Julian cares about my well-being. He wants to make sure I'm protected." "I'm sure he does, right up until his wife finds out about your relationship." Serena's smile faltered for just a moment. "Julian's marriage is complicated." "Most affairs are?" We stood there in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our shared life, and I realized this was probably the most honest conversation we'd had in years. No pretense, no performance, just two people who'd been lying to each other finally telling the truth. "You can't win this, Lucas. I have better lawyers, more money, and a much more compelling story. The devoted mother trying to escape and controlling husband who's been spying on her and stealing marital assets. Interesting narrative. There's just one problem. Which is? I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to make sure everyone knows who you really are." Her phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a third. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "You might want to check your social media," I suggested. The information packages had been delivered that morning to 50 of the most connected people in our social circle. By evening, the contents had been photographed, shared, and distributed to hundreds more. Photos of Serena and Julian at the hotel, bank records showing her payments to Zoe, transcripts of their recorded conversations, all of it spreading through our community like wildfire. Serena's phone kept buzzing as the messages poured in. Friends demanding explanations, business associates expressing concern, parents from Lily's school asking uncomfortable questions. "You bastard," she whispered, scrolling through the notifications. "You absolute bastard." I prefer concerned citizen. The community has a right to know when someone's been embezzling from local charities. I never... You paid Zoe $50,000 over 6 months, money that was supposed to go to the children's literacy program. I have the bank records. That wasn't entirely true. The money had come from our joint account, not the charity funds. But the timeline was suspicious enough to raise questions, and questions were all I needed. Serena sank into a kitchen chair, finally understanding the scope of what was happening. "This will destroy me." "Yes, it will." "And you're okay with that? You're okay with ruining the mother of your child?" "Lily isn't my child. You made that very clear." She looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "I underestimated you. Everyone does. It's been my greatest advantage." The next few days passed in a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and increasingly desperate attempts by Serena to control the narrative. Julian, faced with his own HR investigation and a furious wife, had distanced himself from the situation. Zoe had disappeared entirely, leaving town without telling anyone where she was going. Serena tried everything: tears, threats, promises, even an attempt at seduction that was so transparently calculated it was almost insulting. But the evidence was overwhelming, the community backlash was severe, and her support network had evaporated overnight. The Harbor Festival was still a week away, but the damage was already done. Serena's Community Leadership Award had been quietly rescinded. Her position at Meridian Marketing was under review, and her reputation was in ruins. But she still had one card left to play. Friday afternoon, I got a call from Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a complaint alleging that I was an unfit parent, that I'd been neglecting Lily's needs, and creating an unstable home environment. The caseworker wanted to schedule an immediate home visit. I knew exactly who had made that call. "This is war now," Tom said when I told him about the CPS investigation. "She's going after your relationship with Lily." "Then we end it. Tomorrow." "The festival's not until next week?" "The festival was always just the stage. The real show starts tomorrow night." I spent Friday evening making final preparations, double-checking equipment, and rehearsing the sequence of events that would bring this whole situation to its inevitable conclusion. Serena wanted to play dirty? Fine. But she was about to learn that her computer nerd husband had been holding back his best tricks. Saturday night, Julian was hosting a dinner party at his house, a gathering of Meridian Marketing's biggest clients and most important employees. Serena would be there, playing the role of the wronged woman seeking support from her professional community. It was the perfect opportunity for the grand finale. Julian's house sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn overlooking the harbor, all glass and steel and architectural pretension. The kind of place that screamed, "I have more money than taste," to anyone with eyes to see it. Perfect for a man who thought wealth could solve any problem. I parked across the street at 7:30 p.m., watching the parade of expensive cars arrive for Julian's dinner party. BMW, Mercedes, Tesla, the entire upper crust of our little coastal community, gathered to discuss business and gossip about the Serena situation. They had no idea they were about to become part of the story. Tom sat beside me in the van, monitoring the equipment we'd spent all day installing. Audio's crystal clear, video's perfect, and the upload speeds are excellent. You sure about the timing? 8:15. Right when they're serving dessert and everyone's attention is focused on Julian's speech about company loyalty. And if something goes wrong? Nothing's going wrong. I've been planning this for weeks. At 8:10, I sent a text message to 50 phone numbers. Check your email in 5 minutes for the conclusion of the Serena Fallon story. Tonight's live stream will answer all your questions. Then I activated the system. The beauty of modern technology is that most people never bother to secure their home networks properly. Julian's house had 12 different smart devices connected to his Wi-Fi, from security cameras to smart speakers to the massive wall-mounted TV in his dining room, all of it accessible to someone who knew what they were doing. At exactly 8:15, every screen in Julian's house switched to the same feed, a live video stream of Julian and Serena in his bedroom 2 hours earlier, having the kind of conversation that would end both their careers. The CPS complaint should buy us some time, Serena was saying, adjusting her dress in Julian's mirror. Even if it gets dismissed, it'll make Lucas look unstable. What about the financial records? Julian asked, straightening his tie. He's got documentation going back months. My lawyer says we can claim he fabricated them. Who's going to believe a bitter ex-husband over a respected businessman? And your sister? Zoe's not a problem anymore. I made sure she understands the consequences of talking. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, capturing their entire strategy for destroying my reputation and taking custody of Lily. Every lie they'd planned to tell, every piece of evidence they intended to fabricate, every person they were willing to sacrifice to protect themselves. But the best part came at the end, when Julian's wife walked into the bedroom. I've been listening to your conversation for the past hour, she said, her voice cold with fury. I think it's time we discussed our own divorce arrangements. The live stream cut to black, replaced by a simple message. The truth has consequences. Choose your allies carefully. My phone started ringing immediately. Tom's started 30 seconds later. Within minutes, we had calls from reporters, lawyers, business associates, and half the people who'd been sitting in Julian's dining room when their host's dirty laundry got aired on live television. Phase complete, Tom said, shutting down the equipment. Think that'll do it? That'll do it. We drove back to my house to find Serena's BMW in the driveway and every light in the house blazing. She was pacing in the living room when I walked in, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. You recorded us, she said without preamble. In his bedroom. That's illegal. Actually, Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for private conversations, but Julian's house has a comprehensive security system that records everything. I just helped distribute the footage. That's not... You can't... She stopped, realizing the futility of legal arguments. What do you want? I want you gone. Tonight. Take whatever you can carry and disappear. I have rights. This is my house, too. You forfeited those rights when you committed fraud. The divorce papers cite adultery and deception as grounds for dissolution. Given tonight's evidence, I don't think you'll want this to go to court. Serena sank onto the couch, finally understanding that her options had run out. What about Lily? What about her? You've made it clear she's not my responsibility. She loves you. You're the only father she's ever known. For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack in my chest. Lily was innocent in all this, a 6-year-old girl who'd done nothing wrong except have the misfortune of being born to a mother who saw her as a tool for manipulation. I'll make sure she's taken care of, I said finally, but not through you. Her biological father can step up and take responsibility, assuming you actually know who he is. Serena flinched like I'd slapped her. You're not the man I married. You never married me. You married a fantasy, a convenient fiction that helped you feel better about yourself. The real me was always right here, waiting for you to notice. She stood up, gathering what remained of her dignity. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I watched her pack 2 suitcases with the essentials, moving through our house like a stranger collecting borrowed items. She paused at the door, looking back at the life she was leaving behind. I did love you once, she said quietly. I know. That's what makes this so sad. After she left, I sat in my empty house listening to the silence and thinking about the man I'd become over the past month. The old Lucas would have been horrified by the calculated cruelty of what I'd done, but the old Lucas had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best of people even when the evidence suggested otherwise. The new Lucas understood that sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to become a more efficient predator yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Local news wants an interview. What should I tell them? I typed back, tell them the truth always comes out eventually. Some people just need help finding it. Outside, the harbor lights twinkled in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a foghorn sounded its warning to ships trying to navigate treacherous waters. I understood the feeling. The harbor festival was still a week away, but the real celebration had already begun. Truth had consequences, and tonight, everyone had learned exactly what those consequences looked like. I poured myself a whiskey and raised the glass in a toast to the empty house. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and the end of comfortable lies. The glass was halfway to my lips when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Julian walking toward my front door, his face twisted with rage and his expensive suit wrinkled from whatever confrontation had just ended his marriage. Some people never learn when to quit. I set down my whiskey and went to answer the door. The night wasn't over yet.